This is a one-speaker meeting. Please welcome our speaker tonight.
Wayne.
Wayne. Oh, Ed. It doesn't say, I'm sorry. Excuse me. It didn't say.
It's okay. It said Ed, but, you know, Wayne was sitting right there. It just seemed a lot easier to get him to do it. My name's Ed, and I'm an alcoholic. All right. I'd like to thank Josh for asking me to speak a while back so that I totally forgot about it and I didn't have to think about it until this morning when I woke up. Then I forgot about it again, so it's okay. I have a lot of history in this room. I think the first time I came here was 1980, something like that, 79, 80. I have the gift of 17 years of sobriety right now. I drank and used for 23 years, and let's see, I had an 8-year relapse right in the middle of there somewhere, and anyway, I got a lot of time to speak to spread this out, so let me get comfortable here, because I'm really not comfortable right now. Drink always fixes it, right? Does. Let's see. What happened? No, let's see. Let me start with what it was like, then what happened. That'd be better. Well, you know, I used to think that that I always drank and I used because if you had to grow up how I grew up and where I grew up and under the situations that I grew up under, that you'd need a drink too. And so I grew up in New York. I was, my dad died when I was like 5 years old, and I had this big cowlick that stuck out of the back of my head, and I had freckles all over my face, and my teeth were all crooked, and then I actually didn't have a front tooth growing until I was 16. So, you know, that's enough right there, right? They used to call me Alfalfa because of the cowlick, you know, and I cursed that cowlick. I cursed God. Why'd you have you look at what'd you do to me, you know? And so he took care of it. Check it out. So there's living proof that you do get what you pray for, you know. I just couldn't see it because it was in the back of my head. Till a few years ago, when I was looking in a mirror and there was a mirror behind, I went, holy shit, I'm bald. I swear to God, it was not very long ago. So, you know, so it's a loving God because, look, he left some in the front, so I didn't know what was going on behind me. Anyway, I was back to when I turned 5 and it was really bad, you know. I grew up in a house with my dad died, and like my mom had to raise us, and you know she kept having more kids, so I was the oldest. So as things went on, you know, I'd be cooking and taking the younger ones to school. I mean, even when I was like 7 and stuff, and when let's see, in 1962 World's Fair, I was 8 years old, and my mom sent me there to watch with my little sister, who was a year and a half younger. She put us on the bus and sent us to the World's Fair in New York, right? I think she gave us $5, you know, which was a lot of money back in '62, and a couple of bags of sandwiches, right? And we had a blast, and we had no idea where the hell we were, and I had no idea which bus to take home. But we didn't even think about that, you know? And, you know, of course we got home, but, you know, we didn't even think about any of that stuff. So, but I guess my mother felt that I was responsible enough to be able to take care of my sister at 8 years old and do that. Anyway, so there I had a lot of responsibility on top of looking like alfalfa and all that stuff, you know. And I had, you know, and I was really uncomfortable. And I used to get beat up in the schoolyard all the time, and, you know, things were just miserable. And if you had to live like like I said, you know, you'd want to drink too. And as soon as I found alcohol, I did. You know, I drank, you know, and it worked really well at a young age. And I didn't drink all the time when I was a kid, but, you know, I mean, when I had the opportunity, you know, that's what we'd do. And we were kind of a bunch of feral kids. We ran around and did what we wanted to do. And, you know, we used to rob candy factories and shit like that and go sell them at the convent. And, you know, we pretended like we were the 4-H club. So we were making money, you know. And, you know, we did cases of cigarettes. So we had all our own cigarettes. And since I was, you know, I think I was like 9 and I still didn't have a front tooth. So I was that badass kid that would stick the cigarette in his mouth and it would hold in between the tooth, you know, with the cowlick and the, you know, I was on a stolen bicycle, you know, eventually with a can of beer, you know, and eventually with a, you know, with a shot of heroin, but, you know. Anyway, I ended up coming out here, and so I left all the people that I did know in New York. We came out here, and it was a whole different scene. It was like 1968. All the friends that I met I was in junior high school. I got thrown out of LA City schools in junior high school, and just kept getting in trouble for some reason. Things just, you know. And started using a lot of drugs, acid, you know, smoking pot, drinking beers, stuff like that, whiskey, whatever. Jack Daniels was one of the favorites. And eventually got in more trouble. I split back back east, got in trouble, and there I ran up from New York. I went and hid out in Stamford and got in trouble there, so we went up to Canada and hitchhiked across Canada, and you know, spent a couple, maybe 2 or 3 months up there. Got in trouble, came back over through Washington, you know, got in trouble there. Ended up in some jail. It was like Aunt B, and you know, bringing you breakfast in the morning, and it was kind of cool, but just kept on moving on, you know. And this is before I was even 17 years old. And I got in continual trouble based on drugs and alcohol. You know, it's just stupid stuff that I did. And eventually I was asked, well, I was given an opportunity to go into jail for a longer period of time, or going in the Army. And this was in 72. And so I went in the Army, you know. And plus I figured that was going to, like, you know, that'll straighten me out, you know. Well, you don't have to be 18 to drink in the Army. And then they didn't send me to Vietnam at that time. They sent me to Germany, so I got really lucky, you know. So, and there was really good beer there. So I was then 18 and in Germany, and I could go out and drink all night, and I didn't have to have ID. I didn't have to be 21. So it was perfect, you know, perfect. And there was lots of hash and, you know, drugs and stuff there too. And we used to fly around in helicopters all day, and so we'd be loaded flying around in helicopters all the time. And one time I was on acid flying around in it. And, you know, the pilot knew I was on acid, and I was a mechanic, and, you know, so. So, anyway, long story short, I got fired from the Army. You know, I mean, I'm kind of proud of it still, but you know, the fact of the matter was I couldn't keep a job. I couldn't stay out of trouble. I couldn't even keep from getting thrown out of the Army, you know. And yeah, they said I had a behavioral disorder, my lack of attention to detail, apathy. I mean, the list, I had a big, long list. I had that list up, but I lost it a couple of years back. I was going to save it and give it to my kids, but I put it in storage, and I forgot to pay the storage bill, so, you know, so I lost everything many times. Anyway, but I still remember. So anyway, they threw me out, And so I ended up out, I was out before the Vietnam War was over. I was out, right? A year and a half, I think I was in, maybe a little longer than that. And I do remember that I could not walk out of the house without chugging at least a pint of any kind of liquor. It had to be any kind of hard, it didn't matter what it was, just so that I would be comfortable, just so that I could stop shaking, just so that I would be able to look in the mirror or look at anybody else, you know, just to be able to cross that threshold to go outside. I needed to have something, and I was so uncomfortable. And this was, I wasn't even 21 yet, you know. I was just full of fear, strung out, you know, completely addicted to drugs and alcohol. And so what do you do in that situation? You make sure you got something, you know, and that took care of it, you know, and that was my mission pretty much every day until 17 years ago, you know. And I had ended up here in this room in 26th and Broadway many times, you know, and I felt really comfortable the first time I got to this to AA. I felt really comfortable. It was 26th and Broadway, and they used to have this rocking chair in the front, and the rest of the chairs were just regular chairs, but there was this rocking chair in the front corner. And I remember I went in there and I was shaking and everything the first time I went there, and they put me right up there in the rocking chair, and I thought, oh, they're so nice to put me here in the most comfortable chair in the room. They must know how shitty I feel, right? But really, you know, everyone was looking at me like, fucking, here, you can be like this anytime you want, you know? Have a good look, you know? Because that could be you, you know? So, I didn't get that then, but, you know, but that's what I was told later. I said, yeah, we wanted to make sure everyone had a good look at you, you know? And actually, my mother brought me to that room. She got sober and stayed sober for 12 years before she died. She helped a lot of people over at 26th and Broadway here. She also brought me here, and they had a meeting downstairs, and they had a little restaurant upstairs, so you could come and have dinner and then just come down for the meeting afterwards. And that was pretty cool, but not cool enough for me to stick around, you know. And so eventually I got to the point where I was in this room, I was drinking, I was taking chips high, you know, because I didn't want to tell my sponsor, oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you I drank last week. And he'd ask me how much time I had, and I'd have to think, you know, in my mind. I was not really capable of telling the truth to myself, let alone anyone else. I was completely delusional. There was no way that there was any boundary between fantasy and reality and delusion. It was all mixed together. I had no idea what was going on. I just knew how to get what I needed to get to make me feel the way I really wanted to feel. But I didn't know how to get what I got here from you people yet to make me okay with who I am. I hadn't gotten to that point yet. I got a little bit of time. I think 6 months. That was a little bit of time, and I met my my second ex-wife here, and we were married for 14 years, and had 2 kids during that time. And during the we were together, I don't know, 6 months, and we started using. You know, and basically it went like this. We were going to just use for that day, and then, because we both had commitments the next day, right? So, and we were going to come in and raise our hand, right? And the next day we were just going to come back and, you know, start over again. How many times have that? I mean, I've done it a lot of times. What's the difference, right? I did it a lot. I'm sure a lot of people in here have done the same thing, and hopefully maybe you won't have to do that anymore. And that next day went to 2 days, And then eventually, it was almost 8 years to the week that I was out on a relapse, dragging myself and my wife and my now 2 children around with me to dangerous places. You know, I was driving drunk. I would take them to buy drugs with me. It didn't matter what the hell somebody needed to watch these kids, and I wasn't going to let anybody else watch them, clearly. They're my kids. I knew how to handle them, you know. But I'd take them with me, put them in the back seat. They were a good decoy, too. If you got pulled over, the cops wouldn't take you because you got 2 kids in the back. They didn't know what to do with them. And I pimped those kids to the cops so many times, I can't tell you. They saved my life. Well, they saved me from going to jail anyway, a bunch. But I would take them kids to places. And I also ended up on methadone for 8 years. And, so, they went to the methadone clinic with me every day, too. And I would carry I remember my daughter, when she was first born, I'd bring her in, and the nurse would say, "Oh, what a cute baby." And that nurse wasn't there for like 7 years. And then I was only going to be on it for a couple of months. And then 7 years later, she was back, and she goes, "Oh, I remember you. Oh, look at how big your daughter's gotten," right? I'm going, oh, man, And my son, when he was 3, he was brilliant. He goes, "Hey, Dad, let's play Carlos, and you give me all the money." Right? I said, "Oh, yeah, right. This guy doesn't miss a thing, right? He's brilliant, He's 20 now. He's my roommate, He doesn't pay rent, but he's my roommate. So he's still pretty smart, But I've never had to bail him out of jail either. So, even when I was dragging those kids around with me, I would play ball with them. I'd take them to the park. I was there. I didn't have a dad, so I didn't know how to be a dad, or a good one or a bad one. But you know what? I took those kids everywhere, and they didn't know they were going to the dealer. They didn't know if we were going to the park or the dealer, or if we were going to play at the park and the dealer was going to meet me there. They had no idea, and they're both good kids, and they've been going to meetings with me for a long time. And, I used to think that I drank because of all the things that I described earlier, about how I grew up, how I looked, my feelings, and that's why I drank, and that's why I was a drug addict and an alcoholic. That's what I used to think. But, it took me a while of being around here before I realized that I had 3 other people living in my house that were relatives, like my sisters and my brother. And some of them aren't alcoholics or addicts. So I couldn't blame it on my upbringing or anything like that. It's like, wow, that was a spiritual awakening right there, when I realized that how come they grew up in the same household doing the same stuff, and they're not alcoholics or addicts. They're well balanced. They own homes. They're in relationships for long periods of time. I mean, they've been married and are still married to the same person. Their kids go to school and college, and they have jobs. They don't get fired all the time. They have careers. How come? Well, so it's because I'm an alcoholic. I suffer from the disease of alcoholism. Anytime I put anything into my system, I want more. Doesn't matter if it's drugs or alcohol. It's more. My sponsor called me an ANDA, because it doesn't matter what I put in my system. You give me some booze, I want more booze. Eventually, I'm going to be messed up. I'm going to need some drugs so I can drink, so I can have some more booze. You give me drugs, I'm going to take them until I start drinking booze. And I'm going to start drinking booze, and it's all the same thing. Anytime I put anything in my system, I'm gone. If I got to pick you up from the airport, or my poor mom, I was supposed to pick her up from the airport, and I forgot, because I'll be there I'll see you in an hour, Mom, and then somebody came over and they and I don't know, we smoked a joint or something, or I had a beer or something like that, and it was like a few days went by, you know. It's like, I didn't, sorry, I didn't intend to take your car for 2 weeks either. But, that kind of stuff. I used to do that, I didn't know. I didn't know what was going on. I'd do things like that. And when I did get back here, it came to this. Things got so bad that I actually got on my knees. I asked God to kill me or make it better. Because clearly what I was doing wasn't killing me, I wanted it to, but, just too chicken shit to blow my head off, or, thought that, I'll just do all of this dope, but then, I might want to do some later too, so it's always that. But I did. I got down on my hands and knees, put my hands together, and asked God to kill me or make it better. And I really didn't want him to make it better. I just wanted to be taken out because, I thought it was over. This thing worked for you guys. It did not work for me because I've been in here, sitting around drinking your coffee and, taking your treasury money and things like that, and stealing your books and not reading them. And that's what I did. And so it didn't work for me in my mind. But then after I prayed, I ended up in a rehab. I didn't have any money. No one was going to give me any money. I didn't have insurance. No one was going to, I was pretty much given up on. I ended up in Exodus, which was a good place. It costs a lot of money to go in there. And how I ended up there, I don't know. And that's where I detoxed. And they let me come back there every day after I got out. And I went there every day for 2 years. And what I realized was that if I was helping somebody else out, even when I was feeling miserable and I couldn't sleep and I felt miserable for a couple of years, I didn't feel bad. I went there. I would take people out, walk them around. I'd buy them cigarettes. I'd take them to McDonald's. Do whatever, I just sit with them and talk with them, and that got me out of myself, and that's when I started to feel okay, and that's when I started to be able to work steps with a sponsor. When I started to be able to feel okay physically, my body was getting better. Then my mind started coming around, and then once my mind came around, then I could actually work on stuff, steps, and try and have that spiritual experience that they talk about in the book. And one of the first spiritual experiences I had, I thought it was going to be some flash of light, some like warm feeling that came inside of me. I thought it was going to come, after I finished a certain step, and was on my way back from my 5th step or whatever. It happened when I looked at my driver's license and my name was on it and it was valid and it had my address on it that I lived in, and I drove my car that was registered to me with a sticker that I didn't steal from some other car on it, and insurance, all at the same time. That was a spiritual experience. That was my true first spiritual experience. Because I said, hey, look, I drove for 17 years with warrants and no license. I would just buy cars with out-of-state plates and drive them until they either got towed away or I got pulled over and they impounded them, and I would give them some other person's name. So when I actually came back and got my driver's license, they said I was a perfect driver because I didn't have any tickets or accidents or anything for 17 years. So I got a good discount on the insurance, right? That was a spiritual experience, So I got a sponsor. I worked the steps with him. We were going through We Agnostics, and he had me read it several times. He said, okay, it says we came to believe, right? And I said, yeah, we came to believe in the power greater than himself. Or he goes, well, how do you come to believe? First, you got to find out where you don't believe, right? I went, so I didn't really understand what he was talking about. He goes, no, you got to find out where you don't believe, because that'll tell you where you do believe, you know. So I guess for me, you know, I had to take the back way in or something. So he goes, read it and then write down where you don't believe or what you're not willing to do. So I read it, you know, and I didn't really see anything, you know, right off the bat that I thought should be too concerned with. You know, let's move on, everything's good, you know. He goes, nah, read it again and come up with something. I'm sure there's something in there that you can come up with that where you don't believe or you're not willing to do or you just, you know, have some problem with, you know. And so that went on for like 4 or 5 days, and I was getting pretty upset because he kept having me reread it till finally I threw the book. And it landed on, and I went to pick it up, and it was at this place where it says, we bristle with antagonism at the thought of organized religion, right? So, or basically, I bristle with antagonism. Doesn't matter what you put behind that. I am a bristler. You tell me anything, I bristle, right? The hair on the back of my neck stands up. I bristle. And so I found out something really important about myself here, that the spiritual guy that I thought I had to be able to get through step, you know, 1, 2, and 3, and 4 so that I wouldn't die of this disease, you know, so I thought I was a spiritual guy. Well, you know what? How do you act when the Jehovah's Witnesses come to your door, spiritual guy? You know? Well, I bristle. Sometimes I go naked, you know? You know, not anymore. But before I got to this point, that's how spiritual I was, right? That's how spiritual guys. So basically what I found out from that little lesson in We Agnostics is that I'm not a spiritual guy, I'm an asshole. And basically, I'm kind of a maybe even atheist agnostic, you know, and I had to really explore that area. So basically, a problem that was going on with me during my early sobriety, maybe first 4, I think I had 4 years at this time when this happened. So I had 2 conflicting core ideas going on simultaneously inside me. So 2 conflicting ideas, living with 2 conflicting ideas simultaneously. That doesn't make for peace inside. You cannot be peaceful and have 2 separate ideas that are conflicting going on simultaneously. It's impossible. And I was fortunate enough to find this out and eventually find out what the truth is, you know? And as I found out what the truth was, or I got past that hurdle, about a week later, I met a lama, this lama from Tibet, and I had no idea, you know, what was up with him or anything, but some friends introduced me, and I just felt compelled to ask him to be my teacher, you know, say, hey, will you teach me some stuff, you know, show me what the principles are, you know, and it was pretty awesome, you know, and I had no idea what, you know, how you know, connected he was or anything like that, but he taught me an awful lot. You know, he said, when people piss you off, you get to thank them. You don't go up and say, hey, thanks for pissing me off. But, you know, they're the ones that are giving you the opportunity to practice patience, mindfulness, tolerance, and the principles of these programs, as it says, we practice these principles in all our affairs, right? Now, I'm a bristler, as I said. You know, I get really angry at a flash, you know. I don't act on it anymore. Sometimes I'll throw up the finger, you know. I try to use this one, but, you know, but sometimes I don't. That lesson I had to put into practice. You know, when somebody makes you angry or gets you, you know, stirs up the shit inside, you have to thank them because they're giving you the opportunity to practice patience, tolerance, mindfulness, compassion, understanding, and you know, and that's where we find out about ourselves. That's where we find out about who we really are, you know. Anyway, this guy invites me, this Lama, he invites me to go to India to go to these teachings, and I ended up going to the Dalai Lama's house, right, in this temple, right? And I got to meet the Dalai Lama, you know, and when I came back, people say, oh man, you must be feeling really spiritual. And it's like, you know, now I really know how spiritual I'm not, you know. Now I know how spiritual I'm not. Seriously. You know, I got a lot of work to do. I was just like really blessed. I couldn't even go to Catalina, for Christ's sake. And here I am walking down the street in India, going to the Dalai Lama's house. You know, I could go to the clinic over here on Pontius. You know, I could go to the liquor store, but I couldn't get too much further than that for decades. For decades, I was in Venice on the boardwalk. I could barely get east of Lincoln, you know? And now I'm down there, I'm there, right? And it was one of the most amazing experiences that I think I've ever had. And it's given me, the stuff that I learned is just amazing. It's just like the principles in the big book, you know? They're hard to find. It's hard to find. You go to a chapter, you know, in the big book about, you know, where are those principles, you know? But what this guy taught me was there's the 10 negative actions and then the 10 positive actions. And they were really familiar. Well, the negative actions were really familiar. You know, I knew all of them intimately, you know, and then the 10 positive actions, they seemed a bit foreign, you know? And I'm going, wow, I don't know if I could do that. And he told me, you know, if you just don't do the 10 negative actions, you're doing the 10 positive actions, you know? So, well, I had to learn, right? So how do I behave? When I go out in the morning, how do I behave? Am I going to behave like an asshole? Am I going to rob, steal, cheat? Am I going to do all the stuff that I used to be a professional at? You know, am I going to play the victim card? Am I going to talk shit about you? Am I going to do any of this? You know, I can do that, but I can also choose not to do that. And that's where the work comes in. And that's where, you know, I have to be diligent. You know, how am I going to go out from here and act? You know, I certainly don't want to go out from here and act the way I acted when I came in here. Because when I came in here, I was a pitiful, hopeless, demoralized alcoholic that would kick his grandmother for a field goal to get a drink and pimp my kids to get dope. And I've done that. I didn't kick my grandmother for a field goal, but she died too early. I'm sure I would have, you know. Serious. I'm not kidding. It's not funny. That's how I was, you know. And what I did and what I don't do today is what makes up who I am. You know, what I did isn't who I am. What I did is what I did. What I do right now is who I am. And what I'm going to do, well, I don't know. But I'd like to thank Josh for asking me to come out here tonight. It's a big kickoff of Thanksgiving. It was used to be a fucking wild, horrible time full of disappointment and turkeys flying all over the place and throwing up and fights and, you know, and just a mess, just a fucking mess. And now we don't have to do that unless we like to do that, you know. But I'm not going to do that tomorrow. So I'm just going to go over there and sit down. Thanks.